Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. I am back with another episode of my Road to the Mr. Olympia series. We are now inside of 5 weeks out. So we are very quickly approaching what will be one of the best Mr. Olympias in recent memory. This Olympia is stacked all the way from 1st down to 16th, and if the judges didn't stop judging there, it would be stacked even further. So in today's video, I'm going to compare two guys that have been very competitive throughout their entire careers, but for this Olympia, they're probably realistically looking at 14th through 10th most likely. First up, we have Jon Delarosa. He came back last year after some off time and an injury, and this year is all about cementing that comeback. He placed 4th at this year's very competitive Arnold Classic, and he just punched his ticket to the Olympia by winning the Tampa Pro. Jon is a veteran of the sport, but he's still making improvements, and he's going back to the Olympia after 5 years away from that stage. In this comparison, he's going to be going up against someone a lot like him, so alike that they actually share the same name. We'll be comparing Jon Delarosa to Jon Jewett, a former 212 competitor turned open competitor. Jon, well, both of them, are very complete guys that are very consistent, but not the biggest in terms of structure or overall size. So I think this should make for a very close comparison. For the versions, we are going to be using the Tampa Pro for Delarosa, and for Jewett, although he punched his ticket at the Vancouver Pro, and even though I do think that was his best version, the lighting sucked, and the pics were all taken from a ridiculous side angle. Why they continue to do this at the Vancouver Pro, I have no idea, but luckily Jon had another recent version we can use, and thankfully he's consistent so it won't make too much of a difference. We'll just be using his 2024 Toronto Pro version, which took place a few weeks before Vancouver. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into today's video, Jon versus Jon. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Let's start, of course, with the front double. Now, the sizing is a bit off, maybe. I was told by all the info I gathered to make these guys roughly the same size, as they're both 5'7". But that didn't seem right to me. I think one of these guys is fibbing, or at least the internet was telling me lies, but I would say they'd probably be within an inch of each other. But it wasn't just that was giving me trouble. These guys' angles for their photos were pretty different. Since why their feet are cropped differently, but I do believe that after comparing head sizes and button sizes, this should be okay. Now, Jewett's advantage in this matchup is clear from the first pose. It's a structure. He's not the widest guy, but compared to Delarosa, he's as wide as a house, and Delarosa is fairly narrow. Overall, this makes Jewett look very impressive standing next to Delarosa. That can honestly win him the pose alone, but Jewett racks up other wins. I have him in the quads. I believe he's a bit bigger overall, and he has the much neater separation. I have a very close battle in the lats. This can really go either way, and I have Jewett winning the arms. He has quite the impressive set of biceps. Now, overall, Delarosa does bring a balanced pose. He has pretty good everything, really. Pretty good shape, too, I may add. Very good taper. But that's just it. He's basically pretty average. Jewett just has the more impressive shot, and he wins all these other major body parts as well. I think Delarosa's flow is better, but again, Jewett has all these body parts. Now, in these comparisons, I give 1 to 3 points based on how much you win a pose by, and honestly, I contemplated 2 points for Jewett here, meaning he wins this fairly easily, but although Delarosa doesn't win much, I do think his shape is pretty good here. I think he's fairly underrated in this shot. So then I started looking at a 1-point win because Delarosa's upper body shape really spoke to me, but at the end of the day, Jewett also has pretty good upper body shape, the better arms and better legs, so I do think this is solid enough for him to win this by 2 points. The front lat spread is really the same ordeal here. Jewett doesn't just have the better structure, but he has literally better everything. He once again beats JD, that's Jon Delarosa here, in the legs based on separation. The lats definitely go to Jon, as well as the chest, delts, and arms. In the last pose, I gave Delarosa a little bit of a reprieve there because at least he had a solid, balanced pose. But here, even if he was alone, his flaw, the narrowness I mean, would be on full display. You don't have to look at the other Jon to know that Delarosa is too narrow, and he doesn't have good enough lats or lat presence to do much in this pose. And Jewett's pose, the execution itself is just perfect. It's a big cherry on top of a well-rounded pose. With Delarosa's major flaw of that narrowness and Jewett looking spectacular, I think I can bump this one up to 3 points. Delarosa can shake the first poses off though because he should be entering more favorable territory, but Jewett isn't going to make this easy. In the side chest though, we get to see JD's strengths, his compact mass, and his top-notch quality. Jewett does struggle with a couple of areas in this one, and Delarosa is there to capitalize. Jon's side leg is a bit bigger and he has some feathers in the glute, but Delarosa overall is much drier, so I honestly prefer him. Delarosa is also locking that midsection in and provides a nice touch here, more than Jewett is providing. They're both pretty similar in the arm and delt, so we can go ahead and move on to the pecs, and here Jewett does lack a lot of oomph in his far pec. Delarosa sticks out twice as far and he has very comparable detail, so he'll win the chest as well. And lastly, they're pretty solid from that overall perspective, meaning they both look pretty filled in and muscular. I'd actually give the edge to Delarosa here just slightly. I think that smaller frame helps him look a bit more compact here, and that's what I want. So overall, Delarosa's walking away with his first pose. Closer than the first two have been, but not close enough that I could push it to a 1-point win. The only thing that Jewett may win is the side leg, and to me that's debatable. Delarosa's quality advantage is clear. He looks grainy and hard everywhere. He has the better pecs and the slightly better pound for pound muscularity. Like in the front double though, I think Jewett looks a little too good for a full 3-point sweep, so Delarosa's first pose will be worth 2 points. Now we're going to the back poses, and Delarosa's veteran status and all those years on the grind proved to be very beneficial. In the lower body though, I do think Jewett beats him here. JD may have good hams and good conditioning and the glutes, but Jewett has all that and more. His hams are just as peeled but actually a little more developed, and he has the better adductors along with the better quad sweeps. But what does Delarosa offer in the upper body? Well, he has the better back, plain and simple. Like I said, we can tell his veteran status from this one pose. Look how much more grainy, dry, and just plain more developed he is, especially in the upper back. Now Jewett isn't doing himself any favors with the posing. He should not have his arms that high. It's making his back appear more shallow than it is, because he's not fully contracting it with that stance. His back is wider and pretty filled in, but it's just empty looking. It's a blank canvas. Delarosa's back isn't the best, but the quality is really good, and with a solid lower body, that wins him the pose. Sadly, it'll not be a perfect score though, as Jewett did win half the pose with his better lower body. His upper back is solid too, and I didn't mention this, but he does take the arms and delts as well. This is still pretty straightforward though, so it'll be another 2-point win for JD. Jewett poses the second back pose a lot better, and now it's a very close pose. The lower body is still the same. Jewett maintains his victory. It's clear why, and I already went over it. So what happens in the back to make this so close? Well, in a pose about width and the lats, Jewett is at a slight advantage just based on what we know. We saw his structural advantage clearly in these first two front shots. Now for a narrower guy, JD does do pretty well here in terms of width. He isn't as wide as Jewett, sure, but he's pretty good for what he was dealt. What Delarosa does beat Jewett in are those spinal columns though. Again, this is his veteran status showing itself. He has those really thick spinal erectors perfectly tying in with the traps. Overall, Jewett's back is pretty thick. He has solid traps and erectors too, but you gotta love Delarosa's very thick, apparent, and uniform ridges along his spine. But unfortunately for Delarosa, Jewett does clap back with a clear win in the lats. As I said, his are wider, but the lats are just also thicker. They come out a bit further and taper lower, and there's just more meat there on Jewett's back. He looks more like a stingray, to be honest. And then when you add that, the lower body win, and the overall width win, this pose is going to buck the trend and is going to Jewett. There is some good news for Delarosa though. We are bypassing a perfect margin here. Not just that, but we're going to bypass the 2-point margin as well. Delarosa can really thank his back for this. I really do like it. And it's the most important piece, so this narrows this pose up considerably. Jewett won both the lower body and the back, so the argument is there for a standard 2-point win, but I just like Delarosa's back a little too much for that. So 1 point to Jewett. Now we have our last side pose, and to be honest, this one is going to be short and sweet because it's a little hard to judge. Both of these guys aren't the best here, and Jewett didn't hit it in his routine, so we have to rely on this blurry photo from the comparison round. Now there are two main issues I can see with either gentleman. For Delarosa, it's his notably undersized and unrefined tricep, and for Jewett, it's a little bit of a blurry midsection. Now for this one, I can't tell 100% how bad it is because of the photo, but what I'm getting is that the lower stomach just doesn't look that good, a little washed out. Other than that, these guys are really similar, but the flaw of each gentleman has to be the deciding factor. I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here for Jewett, but an actual tricep is actually just good to have in the side tricep pose, and Delarosa honestly really throws me off with the lack of his. It's a small part of the pose, but it completes it in a way. The tricep should be a cherry on top. However, this pose could easily go to JD if the other Jon's midsection is as bad as I actually think. Overall, I have to go by what I see here, and I like what I see from Jon Jewett just a little bit more. Having a tricep completes the side tricep pose for him. There is nothing more than a 1-point victory though. I contemplated even leaving this pose blank, so really no one is winning this, quote unquote. Alright, now we have the abs and thighs, and honestly, I may have been right about Jon Jewett's waist based on what I see here. Now we have two variations here for Jon, but I don't think either of them really win. They're definitely not knockouts. First off, it will be close regardless because Jewett does win the thighs portion in either variation. Delarosa's quads have those narrow insertions, and Jewett has some cleaner details. But the abdomen is where Jewett loses this. He starts out good in the upper abs, but then his lower stomach has some sag to it. It's unsightly to say the least. Delarosa doesn't have the best abs, but they're uniform and solid in terms of both development and separation. In terms of their head-on versions, I think it's a pretty standard win for JD, but the left pick gets Jewett a little closer. But honestly, the more I look at it, the more I think it doesn't really matter. The abs are still kind of messy, the obliques look okay, but the actual abs are not symmetrical nor defined. Nonetheless, he is still winning the quads though, so Delarosa can't make this a clean sweep no matter what. And yes, this is going to Mr. Delarosa. At the start, I thought Jewett could push this one to a 1-point win, and I still kind of see that argument I was making, but the head-on version of his pose with that washed out lower stomach left such a bad taste in my mouth. Delarosa doesn't wow you in this one, and while Jewett does, it's for a poor reason. I gotta give this to Delarosa by a standard 2-point margin. The most muscular keeps this as a close comparison all the way to the end. In the quads, I yet again have Jewett for that better, cleaner separation. In the arms and delts, really for all intents and purposes, these guys are way too similar. I think I'd maybe give Delarosa a slight nod in the arms though, but that's a stretch. But in the torso heap, Delarosa gets some key wins. Jewett's abs don't look as bad as they did in the last pose. There isn't that weird stomach sag, but the abs really aren't that defined yet again. Delarosa's are, and even though it's just a small part of the pose, it's a nice highlight. Jewett's chest also hurts him like it did in the side chest. He just needs more thickness. Delarosa isn't anything special, but there is more density and detail there. I think this one really comes down to just what you like more. Delarosa looks a little more muscular overall, but he's also at the same time looking a little bit narrow. And just as a pose, I like how Jon Jewett is hitting it a little more. But with the wins Delarosa picked up and with him looking a little more filled in, I gotta go with him. This is not a super convincing win though. It really does come down to personal preference at this rate. So for that, Delarosa will just get a small 1-point victory to round this comparison out. Now that we're done with the comparison round, we're going to go to the overall physique categories round. Each gentleman will be looked at through 4 categorical lenses: shape, muscularity, flaws, and conditioning. Although these guys are really close. So close in fact, I contemplated leaving this entire round blank. Honestly, they have pretty even physiques across the board, and where they aren't similar, they usually bring slightly different things to cancel each other out. I did ultimately decide to really push my internal arguments for winners though, just so I could have something in this round, but I could only come up with something in 3 out of the 4 categories. I left the flaws category blank because they both have a semi-notable one. Delarosa is narrow, but Jon Jewett had that lower ab issue. Both of their flaws cost them poses, so it was pretty hard to say which was worse. Delarosa's flaw is something more fundamental, it's literally down to a structure, while Jewett's is more like a stain on his overall physique. Overall, I just let it be with a tie and left it blank. Now for the other categories, I fully expect disagreement. But like I said, I really pushed and nitpicked here so I can at least have something. For conditioning, they are both good, but I gotta give this 1-point win to Delarosa. Why? More muscle maturity and a slightly grainier, harder look overall. And that's really all I have to go on. Next in muscularity, I gave Jewett 1 point. I think Delarosa is a bit more complete, but Jewett is bigger overall, more size, bigger structure, and really just as muscular pound for pound. And finally in shape, and this is utterly arbitrary, but I ended up giving Delarosa basically a 1-point consolation prize. My reasonings, if you want to call them that, was the fact that his waist was smaller and the front double was a selling point. He looked pretty shapely, at least compared to Jewett in that one. Both of these guys really look like bodybuilders though. Neither of them have stellar shape. Now we're at the end of the real comparison, and it turns out these two guys were neck and neck. I expected them to be close going into this video, but they literally couldn't be closer without a tie. In fact, since the inception of this judging system, this has been the closest victory by far. Jon Delarosa did end up winning this comparison with 55.6 points to Jon Jewett's 44.4 points. Now I know that is a 10-point gap, but there really wasn't a widespread of points, especially in the second round of the comparison. That gap is actually only coming from a literal 1-point win. With me just being one person and not a panel of judges, this is too close for me to call. On paper, Delarosa does win, and for me personally, that is my vote, even though I think I like Jewett's physique just a bit more. I think Delarosa is just a hair more well-rounded. More maturity, the grainy look, good shape, good conditioning, a better back, at least in the rear double. Like I said, he's just overall more well-rounded. But I could easily come up with a few reasons for Jewett to take this one. So yes, I was going to leave it at a tie. It would really come in handy if I had a panel of judges to average our results out. And thankfully, I actually am in the position to ask some top creators in our space, and everyone I asked after taking a look at the same picks we looked at picked Jon Jewett as their winner. So it does look like I'm the odd man out, so while I stand by my own judging, that's not what this is about. From the Project Bodybuilding judges panel, we can now deliver the results, and in a tie-breaking 3-1 decision, Jon Jewett is the winner of today's comparison. Now, do I think he will place higher on show day? Honestly, that's 50-50 too. I think if he tweaks his back pose and peaks a bit better, he will win for sure. And those updates are looking crazy. But as of right now, it's up in the air. Historically, the judges have really favored Delarosa. Keep in mind, he was 4th of this year's very stacked Arnold, and he has a very decorated career. But Jewett is on the other end of the career spectrum. He's a new open guy. He's younger. He's fresher. He has more potential for sure. Delarosa is not done. I'm not saying that. But Jewett obviously has more years in him. That could be a decision maker for the judges. If they see that Jewett and Delarosa are close, they may want to reward and encourage the guy that has better longevity in the sport. I'm actually more inclined to say that the judges will stay with Delarosa to place higher though. He's shown that he is still improving, and as long as he doesn't get worse, I don't think the judges will switch up on him that easy. Like I said, they've historically preferred him. But even then, I'm only giving him a 55-45 chance to place higher. I'm just giving him the ever so slight nod in my predictions. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. What did you guys think of the Battle of the Johns? Did you have Jon or Jon winning? Let me know down in the comments. And if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. By the way, if you guys are looking for some high quality supplements and want to support the channel, then be sure to head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Galaxy. yeah. Gotta get that Lexi, yeah.